Good afternoon, Chad. Great to see you. And thank you, Ryan.
Too. Thanks for joining us.
Of course.
I guess we're just going to hop right into it here.
Okay.
A few questions about housing and the upcoming session. So.
Sure. And would you like a bit of a brief bio or introduction?
Sure. Yeah.
All right, great. Well, I'm your state senator, Annette Cleveland, representing the 49th Legislative District, which encompasses Vancouver and parts of Clark County. I was born and raised in the community of Vancouver. I've spent the majority of my 38-year career here working in public policy and served as staff to 2 different United States senators for well over a decade. Went on to work in government affairs for the American Cancer Society, and then most recently spent 14 years with Legacy Health, focused on federal health policy. So have a firm foundation of policy experience and knowledge in order to best serve you in Olympia.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was helpful, actually.
Great.
Our first question is, how should the legislator address the housing shortage in Washington?
Well, as you know, this has been a question that we've been grappling with for a number of years now. And as chair of the Senate Healthcare Committee, I distinctly understand that housing is health, housing is stability. And in order to bring the necessary focus and resources that this priority needs in Olympia, 3 years ago, my colleagues and I, when the Democrats took the majority in the Senate, actually created a committee focused specifically on housing stability and affordability. Since that time, we've been able to make, I think, incredible progress forward. We've passed legislation to help address housing discrimination, strengthen housing assistance programs, reform eviction practices, and we've invested last year alone well over $175 million in the Housing Trust Fund. But more than that, we know it's going to continue to require us to take a multi-pronged approach. And I understand that there's a tremendous need for entry-level housing in particular, and we have to continue to work to better incentivize homeownership. And so for me, I think we have to continue to focus on making progress toward providing additional funding to local governments to address housing needs, to pass policies that better encourage or allow for increasing the housing supply, and whether that's ADUs, which we passed legislation pertaining to recently, as you know, or tiny houses or other solutions. We need to also look at that. But I think we also have to look at incentivizing and better home ownership and making it easier for people to afford a home. And we need to continue investing in the Housing Trust Fund. By no means do I think we're done in making those critical investments. And then finally, I'll just mention, I also understand, given that I work in healthcare, and I understand regulation upon regulation and how difficult that is to not only navigate, but how it increased costs. And so very interested in continuing work with my colleagues to streamline regulations, help address the cost of home ownership, as well as better encourage people to purchase a home. I'm going to also finally mention that what I worry about a lot, particularly because I'm a mom, is about housing being unattainable for our kids and their kids and for the next generation to come. So I want to continue to maintain focus on that broader picture issue as well, and work with you to find those policies that we think are going to, best be able to ensure that next generation is going to be able to also afford a home.
That's a great point. Thank you. Second question, and I know you have these questions prior, is that correct?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. What approach will you have in the approaching session as it relates to revenue?
Well, obviously we face budget challenges like so many across our state and country right now, given particularly the pandemic. And so what I've been advocating for with my colleagues is taking a very, very cautious, very measured approach to the budget. Obviously, the most recent state revenue forecast last month indicated that there's a rebound in our economy, and I'm hopeful that that trend continues. But in the meantime, from my perspective, in the face of all the unknowns, the fear, the anxiety that COVID has brought for all of us, it's my job as a policymaker to do all I can to help maintain some consistency and some stability as much as possible for businesses, employees. And that said, however, I also think that as a state, we have a responsibility to utilize every tool we have in the toolbox to help spur the economy and to help get people back to work. And for me, that means investing in infrastructure. It means investing in transportation infrastructure, but also investing in broadband infrastructure and public works projects. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the biggest infrastructure need here in Vancouver and our region is the need to replace the Interstate 5 bridge. And investing in that needed maintenance and preservation project would not only bring needed jobs, but it would help attract new businesses and to our area, new employees, and hopefully encourage more home sales. So that's where I intend to put my focus next year to help our economy recover and to hopefully lessen the need for new revenue.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Third question, how should we balance our commitments and investments with the economic impacts that have been felt statewide?
Well, big question. And, it's difficult to know when you've struck that right balance. And obviously coronavirus has dominated all of our lives over the course of this past 6 months. It feels like forever. And it has created tremendous economic disruption. So I'll mention that prior to the end of this year's legislative session, we recognized the looming crisis of the global pandemic and the fact that we needed to take action immediately. So before my colleagues and I ever concluded the legislative session this year and left Olympia, we passed a COVID response bill that appropriated $200 million. And we left the language of that bill fairly broad because we wanted to ensure it would meet needs that we may not have necessarily known of at the time. And in addition to that, while it was difficult, the governor, before he signed the budget we sent him this year, also cut $450 million in new spending in that budget before he put his signature on it. So I think because there recognition that proactive measures needed to be taken to meet our commitments. In next session, we're going to have to continue to recognize that, but also continue to recognize that our businesses, employees, citizens continue to need support and help to mitigate the impacts of COVID. So I think we need to take a really careful, as I said, approach to meeting our commitments and investments while we work to address lingering economic impacts of the pandemic. So we need to continue to look for efficiencies, take measures to save costs, and carefully consider new revenue that brings a return on investment like infrastructure that helps spur the economy and creates jobs.
There's a second piece to that question.
Mm-hmm.
What are your overall goals for the upcoming legislative session?
Well, my overarching goal always, and the reason I ran for office was to help ensure that this community as well as our state can be one of opportunity for every single individual. And so for me, that means ensuring that there's always focus on access to quality education, access to a living wage job, access to quality healthcare, and access to housing, quality housing. So I don't take my eyes off those foundational goals in order to build a framework of success that's going to improve the future for families today. So my top 3 priorities for next session are to continue making progress on replacement of the I-5 bridge and investing in that infrastructure, continued response to COVID, and keeping people safe, but also continuing to ensure our healthcare system readiness and addressing the newly uninsured, people who've lost their jobs and their healthcare because of COVID, and addressing disparities in healthcare, particularly those that COVID is laying bare for us to see. So finally, most important, economic recovery, and working to help ensure that we can get people back to work and back on their feet. So, you know, I know how important maintaining our quality of life is to every single one of us. And this is a very special community and a special state, place where people want to live. And I want to work with you to ensure that that remains the case. Want to continue to work to identify policy solutions that are going to remove barriers and challenges to homeownership, and hopefully in the long run better ensure that you know, the dream of owning a home is possible for our kids and our grandkids.
Wonderful. Well, that is the end of our questions. Thank you for taking a few minutes to
Of course,
talk to us
thank you,
today.
Chad, Ryan, and Joanne. It was my pleasure, and very much looking forward to hopefully returning to Olympia in January and continuing to partner with you to put forward good policy that's not only going to you know, help get our economy back to work, but also help better ensure that you can do your jobs well.
Thank you.
Help serving people.
Great. And we'll all get out and vote.
Yes, that too.
Ryan, did you have anything to add, or?
No, Senator, certainly appreciate you taking the time and, you know, your partnership and your work. So this is great. I appreciate you taking the time to do it.
Absolutely. Well, I hope you're all doing well. And all indications are that home sales are still remaining fairly steady here in this region, correct?
Correct. Yep. Surprisingly strong.
That's excellent. Glad to hear it. Well, I'm going to keep my fingers crossed and hope we can take steps to make sure that that continues.
Absolutely.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
All right.
Great.
Appreciate your time.
Thanks so much.
Okay.
Have a good
Thanks.
afternoon.